The United Nations Environment Programme recently released a report which eventually they submitted to the president, indicting Shell and other oil firms operating in Ogoniland concerning the oil spill. Well, the report also says that people were drinking from wells which were contaminated with benzene, a known carcinogen, at 900 times recommended levels. And so you ask yourselves, what are government agencies doing? How did we get to this stage? Well, these are some of the questions we expect to ask and perhaps see if we could get some answers this morning here on Sunrise Daily. And we're joined now by Dr. Uduaghan, Governor of Delta State. Thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's interesting, this report. I know that there are those who also say that not exactly surprising, because in time past this had been raised either by Mossop or one group or the other, and government seemed to have turned a blind eye about this. But when you saw this report or when you heard about the report, did you react differently than you did before?
Well, thank you very much. The report was not surprising, especially to those of us who are familiar with what is happening in that region. Somehow, even before the report was released, I had seen some of the UNEP officials who were doing the study. Unfortunately, at that forum where I met them, initially they were trying to push it to sabotage, but some of us did not quite agree on the issue of sabotage. Now, oil activities has been on in that region for about 50 years, over 50 years. And in that period, the history has been the oil companies came with whatever technology they had. Nobody looked at the technology they were using. And with those technology, they damaged a lot of the environment across the Niger Delta. The Ogoni issue is now, and I'm happy that it is coming at this time, it's like a wake-up call for all of us, those in government, those in the oil industry, those in the community, and in fact, every stakeholder. The Ogoni report is now a wake-up call for everybody. Now, I grew up in the Niger Delta, and I can tell you this, that as a young boy growing up in a village, we wake up early in the morning with cockcrow. That time there was no alarm. Cockcrow, wake up early in the morning with a bush lamp, go to the farm, tap rubber. By 6 o'clock it is morning, you go to your farm, help the women who are farming. By then there will be maybe roasted yam or plantain with palm oil ready for you. You finish, then you go back to school. Then in the afternoon you go home to cook. For those of us who used to enjoy banga soup, you know, while boiling the banga, you could you just put the banga on fire. The banga is palm fruits on fire, and then you run to the river, and you can literally put your hands in the river and catch fish that you use to cook that banga soup. That meant that at that time the soil was very good for agriculture. There were fishes in the river, so everything was there. And because of that, people were able to feed themselves. Because they could farm, they could fish, they were able to feed themselves. But what we now see is a situation where those farms do not yield the products the way they are supposed to yield. The rivers do not have fishes anymore. So the people, their traditional occupation of fishing and farming is lost. And because that is lost, they cannot even feed themselves. And when they cannot feed themselves, they become hungry. And of course, when they are hungry, they are angry. And when they are angry, they tend to be violent. So when we talk about the Niger Delta violence, there are so many things that are associated with it. And until we look at all these issues, that violence will not be reduced. So coming back to where I started, over the years, there has been a lot of pollution in the Niger Delta, pollution of the air, pollution of the water, and of course, pollution of the soil. And we must thank the NGOs, the civil rights society, and in fact some community leaders who have even lost their life because of agitation for this. And in the period, I would say government at all levels has been virtually like docile on issues of environmental pollution in the Niger Delta.
Well, I know you may have heard this before, but there are those who probably not satisfied with the response they've gotten about it, because they ask again and again, well, yes, at the federal government level, there might have been a lot of complicity, But what about the state governments? I mean, yes, some funds always goes to them at some point in time. Now they ask the funds that went to them. Was there any concrete plan in place either by the state government in the Niger Delta to see that they could actually do something about the pollution that was going on in the state at the time?
Yes, let me take my own state, the Delta State. Now, when I came in as governor, because of my experience as a child, and because I was also planning a state that at the end of the day would not depend entirely on oil, I needed to face certain other areas, and that is the area of agriculture. And to be able to deal with agriculture, I needed to deal with these environmental issues. Because like I said, without the good soil, you cannot be talking about agriculture. With polluted waters, you cannot be talking about fishing. But to deal with this, first of all, you need to identify the problem, the extent of the problem, and remedy it, and of course plan to stop future occurrence of the problem. How did we go about trying to identify the problem? We know that at the federal level, talking about climate change issues at the international levels, there'll be this argument between various governments at the federal level. But for us as a state, at international level, states have come together, what we call the subnational government, come together. How do you help each other in climate change issues? We are a developing country, and there are developed countries that have caused the main massive climate change problem. So we keyed to international bodies like what we call the R20, or the Global Governors Forum, in which California was a main actor in that forum. We had cooperation with them, and through the help of California, we were able to get to the headquarters of Chevron. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor then, made it possible for me to get in touch with the top management on Chevron to discuss this problem. Because you need to first sit down with the international oil corporations to discuss the problem. And through that discussion, Chevron made a commitment that first of all, they'll be able to stop air pollution by 2015. So we were able to get that extra commitment from them. But going further, like I said, you need to know the extent of the damage. You need to know this, so you need to do the study to know the extent of the damage. Now, the Ogoni one was done by Shell. For me, if I accuse you that you have polluted the place and you are the one now paying for the studies, of course, the result that will come out might probably not have problem. And that's why there's some criticism on the Shell one. But for us as a state, we are first of all trying to identify the extent of the damage. And we set up a lot of structures to identify them. It is when we now know the extent of the damage and how much it will cost to deal with it that we will now come out and try to raise funds.